So how many volunteers now?
Are you asking who?
Everybody, yeah, right now how many people are we?
Today we are about 20.
20. And how many active volunteers?
So some of these have been volunteering in the past.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And Lisa over there is the one who founded the center,
Oh, wow.
together with Maria next to her.
Thank you. Wow, the pioneers, huh? That's great. 20 years. Great.
Lisa used to live in Kathmandu with Lama Yeshe and
Really?
Lama Sutma and with Pam as well.
I'm sure you have many stories from them.
Yeah, I knew you in your previous life.
Wow. Any stories? Any interesting stories? Huh?
Lots.
Can you tell us one? If you want.
Well, at one point I lived in Hong Kong. I was working there.
Oh, so you know Peter Kitch, probably.
Peter Kitts and Nicole.
Oh, wow.
And we went on a boat ride with you. You were this big.
Okay.
We went out and
Pemba was there?
Huh?
Pemba. No, was it Juan? Maybe Basili.
It was when Nikolai and Peter Kitch and Nicole.
Okay. I remember.
Yeah.
And then?
And we all day we sailed and we had lunch on the boat and
Oh.
we went swimming and it was really nice.
It's nice.
And you make a lot of jokes when you're a little kid.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I don't know how to work this.
Indeed.
Okay. You wanna sit? You wanna sit out here? Or? Okay. So, Copenhagen. I feel maybe Copenhagen is a very special land. There's a certain vibration to this land. There's something about this land. I don't know what it is, but it's very powerful, very strong. Very strong feeling. The land here is it's like she's very aware, like very powerful. I'm sure you feel, right? All of you live here? In Denmark? That's great. Do you feel it? Do you feel there's something about the land? Yeah? They say Denmark is one of the happiest countries in the world. Per capita. Okay, so I don't know. So what is this supposed to be? Is it supposed to be like me giving some advice, or asking questions, or you asking questions, or?
It can be either of those, how you prefer. We have some questions. I have some questions. I'm sure there will be some questions in the audience.
Okay.
But it's up to you how you prefer
Okay.
to do this.
So I think maybe I'll just start a little bit like doing an introduction, maybe. So I think it's really important to really understand and see very clearly that first of all, the volunteering, it's like karma yoga. You know what karma yoga means? So it's basically you're giving your time and your space and your energy to a cause that's much bigger than ourselves. And not only for this lifetime, but for future lives. And not only for our lives, but for many other lives of other people and sentient beings. So the result is much bigger than we can ever imagine. That I think is something that we have to really understand, because the motivation it's already there. That's the most important. Whether you do a lot or you do a little bit, if the motivation is wrong, it's completely useless. You know, so if you have the right motivation and then you do the speech, the thinking and the action together, then it becomes really powerful. Especially if you do the three at the same time. Multitasking. So that's so of course, like even if we're not talking Dharma, just in practical everyday life, dedicating your time, your space, and your energy, your thoughts, your speech, and your actions to other sentient beings, without talking about Dharma, already has a very good effect on yourself and on everybody that surrounds you. So when you actually dedicate that to other people, the result will always be positive. However it happens, depends on the way how you see it, how you understand it, how you react, how you experience. It's all based on how we think, because many times the emotions, the attitude, the energetic kind of, reactions are mostly based on the thoughts. So it's really important to be aware that the thoughts can really play tricks on you sometimes. Because most people, they believe their thoughts completely. Which is a little bit ridiculous, because the thoughts are like clouds. They come, they go. When they're, in Spanish you say ephemeral. In English I don't know how you say that word.
Ephemeral.
Sorry?
Ephemeral.
Ephemeral. Okay, so it exists like that. So it's ephemeral, the thoughts. They're not solid. They're not there. You can't really, But at the same time, they're so powerful. Because everything that you see man-made started with a thought. So it has both sides to it. But you have to be able to recognize. Otherwise you just fall into the same samsaric cycle that we've been there for so long. So now we have really the opportunity, without talking Dharma, just to give some of our energy and our time and our space with the thoughts, starting with the thoughts, the motivation, then the speech, when we talk to the other people, and then the action, what we do, how we spend our energy. So already we have that opportunity, which with the right motivation will only bring happiness, will only bring like evolution, growth, spiritual development. So that's the situation right now. So for that, I really want to thank all of you, for being here and for really dedicating that, to the center, to the community, to humanity, to Earth, and the time that's going to happen in the future. Because you're creating the cause for many generations to come. Not just now. So anyway, I just wanted to say that so that you are very clear about that. It's important that you see that. Because otherwise, sometimes maybe you're like, you just think small mind, and you don't really see the big picture, the long term. So that's, I think, very important. And I just want to thank you, on behalf of everyone. And yeah, because really it's amazing. Without you, this wouldn't exist. This space, for many other people who are going to be able to come here. Many people are suffering, and they know they're suffering, and they don't know how to really work that out. And even many people don't even know they're suffering, but deep down inside they know there's something wrong, it's not working, and they're spending their life, they're spending their time, and they fall into this cycle of suffering, of frustration, of ignorance, so you are all creating the cause to offer this space and this opportunity, wisdom and method, the wisdom of understanding the reality of our own mind, and the method of putting the compassion, the dedication, the time to everybody else. So as long as our self-cherishing mind is there, the result is going to be suffering. As long as we dedicate our time to helping other sentient beings, the result is going to be happiness. And I believe, and I think all of you would agree, we all search for happiness. Even the single-celled amoebas, they're searching for happiness. Even though it's very different the way they search and we search. So that's the thing, many times we search for happiness, but the way we do it creates a result completely the opposite from what we want. But anyways, I'm going to talk about that later. So yeah, so I think it's a huge benefit what you're doing, and I really want to thank you, and I really feel great energy, really good energy, very special, very, very special, very cozy. Really, yeah. So anyways, yeah, thank you for inviting us here, and from Indila and from my behalf, we really want to thank you for having us here, really, truly, and thank you for the house also. Yeah, and Mikael, he's been inviting me for the past 7 years to Copenhagen.
Yes, especially to Christiania.
Yeah. No, I didn't expect to be like that. It really was a surprise to see that kind of community, that kind of mentality, you know, that kind of freedom. It's interesting. Anyways, so yeah, please, I would really appreciate some questions or any kind of subjects you want like me to talk about. That'd be nice.
Maybe I can start giving
Sure,
you a
sure.
few questions, and then we can open up to the.
Don't be too hard, okay?
And I also just wanted to introduce you to Martin. You met him before,
Oh,
but
yeah.
he's the other
Hello.
director here.
Where did
of
we
the
meet?
center.
Last time we met was in Singapore for Rinpoche's
Long Life?
teacher.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. And before that?
I think we met also a few years back at the Universal Education
In
Gathering.
Toulouse?
as well. Yes.
Oh,
and
okay.
maybe one more time, I think. But
Where?
just briefly. I can't remember exactly, but we met in France at the Lake Beach. Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Martin did the opening talk of the whole gathering in France.
So you're involved in universal education?
Not so much anymore, but I was back then. Yes.
He's working with with Rasmus in the potential project.
Ah,
So
very
in that
nice.
way I do, yeah. But,
How's Rasmus?
He's good, yeah. Business is growing and the project is growing. So
That's really good.
very busy, but also he's very enthusiastic about it. So very happy to see it succeeding.
He's coming
probably
today?
traveling since he's not here.
No, I think
Oh, he's
he
not
couldn't be here. He's traveling a lot these days,
Okay.
spending half his time in the United States.
Oh,
and
okay.
other places in
Can
the
you
world.
say hi to him for me?
I will definitely.
Please thank him also.
Yes, I will.
For really making a big difference.
Yeah.
Especially in the corporations.
Yeah,
They need it. The workplace, people suffer a lot, you know.
yeah.
So that really helps a lot. Okay, so what's your question?
Well,
What subject?
one question or subject I would like you to talk about is that I know you have many ideas. I mean, if PMT is an old organization and we have established a certain way of doing things, and this center has been existing for 20 years, so we have learned a way to organize ourselves, and we know what's working and what's not working. But I think it's really interesting because I know you have many ideas about organization, and you have been studying organization at university, and I'm really curious to hear your views or your ideas about how we can run or organize
It's very dangerous.
a Dharma center in a modern city like Copenhagen.
No, it's running well now, right?
Well, we have issues in terms of our finances. It's very hard to get the finances work, and the number of volunteers is fluctuating. Obviously, sometimes we are a lot, sometimes we are less. And I think one of the problems we have been facing, which seems to be similar for many organizations, is that we have been having a very centralized way of running the center, which means that a few people have been taking on a lot of tasks, which means that these people have also experienced burnouts within this community. So we are trying to find a new way to organize ourselves that's more sustainable for all of us, and where we can maintain the inspiration and the energy. But it's a difficult exercise, and we are still learning.
Maybe buy some lottery tickets. Who knows? No, I mean, of course, living in communities is not easy. Working in communities is not easy. Already just in a relationship, just with yourself already it's difficult. Imagine with one person, so imagine with the whole community. Where you're responsible and you have, like you're accountable. So that's the thing, I think it's not easy, to be a leader. It's not easy. And it's not easy also to agree, because everybody has different perspectives, everybody has different insights, and everybody relates to each other in a different way based on their own experience of life. So it's not easy to actually have the same empathy towards everybody, because many times we're going to disagree based on that concept of where we come from. So that's one of the main issues why many times projects don't work. About 90% of the projects fail because of human relations. 90%. So if human relations worked, it would be almost 100% success. So that's it's a big deal. Most of the times they fail because people are not able, or not capable, or not willing to really relate to each other and have that empathy to understand and to be open to also what the other person is going through, or how they think, or what they think. So that's why it's important to put in practice the Dharma. Not just mantras, meditation, teachings, books. No, actually put it in practice in everyday life. And communities are a really good example, to really put that in practice. I mean, of course, we have to start with ourselves, because we have the relationship with ourselves, which is the most important. And then the relationship with the people that we frequent normally. And then, of course, if we're in a community, then that's another step. So, if you want to practice Dharma, then you can practice a practical way, which is much more difficult, actually, than reading a book or doing mantras. That doesn't make you a Buddhist. I'm sorry to say. I mean, you may think it makes you Buddhist, but it doesn't. The real Buddhist is your attitude towards life. It's the way you think, the way you act, the way you speak. Well, I'm getting very hot now. So I think most of us, we already know when we do something wrong, or when we're not actually being able to deliver the way we would like to, because we get emotional, or we throw the towel very easily, or we don't really understand. Sometimes it's really important to see the picture from all directions, not just one perspective. Oh, he said that, so it's like this. No. They said that, then what does the other person say, and this person, and that person, how does it work? What is the actual, try to understand from all the perspectives, and then you can maybe say something. Because for us, it's really easy to judge. It's very easy to point the finger, because it makes us forget about our mistakes. We don't want to recognize our mistakes. We don't want to look at ourselves. That's too difficult. It's much more easy to say, oh no, look at them. So when you do that, then you kind of, you take away responsibility from actually, covering yourself with the ego blanket. We keep ourselves warm with the ego blanket. Oh, it feels so cozy. Actually, it's not cozy. The blanket smells really bad. And it really stinks a lot. It does. It's really dirty blanket, and it's really dirty. It's full of shit, I'm sorry to say. And it comes from many past lives of patterns and habits which we have been grasping desperately. Because somehow we have this concept that the I really exists, you know, and then we try to protect that concept of I. But actually, if we check, we can't really find it. So why do we protect it so much? Why do we fight for it? Why do we get so emotional just to protect this concept, which is actually making us unhappy? And unconsciously we know it. Even consciously, intellectually, we know it. But in practice, we act the opposite. Why is that? You know, so that is why many times this is a really good opportunity. Everyday life, of course, but especially in a Dharma ambience. You know, this is very good because you can really work together. You know, in other places, people cannot really relate to that concept because maybe they just have another idea of life. But here, at least, you can relate to each other and you can support each other, help each other. You know. So yeah, try to take off that blanket. You know, you don't need blankets. It's very warm already. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think that would be, I mean, that's the first step, of course. The second step is finance. Because also, one of how I see it at least, and how Lama Yeshe used to see it too, is if centers have good finance, then they can actually give good wages. And if people can work full-time in a center, then they can really pay for their family or pay for their lives based on the work in the center. So then they're not doing two jobs. You know, because most people are working full-time and then they're volunteering in the center. So that creates a lot of stress. So when they come to the center in a way, maybe if they're not recognized, depending on the pride and the ego, of course, or if they're not appreciated, you know, then that stress can become bigger. Or maybe based on the work, based on the family, based on the small time that they have, free time, free space, then also that can create a lot of stress and frustration. You know, so that's why it's also normal that sometimes people who are working another job and have a family to feed, maybe don't have time for themselves and are volunteering, sometimes they have some negative, you know, feelings. It can happen. It's normal. You know, so that's why, you know, from my perspective, I think it's really important if it is a center to be financially independent and have the capacity to really pay full-time wages to the people. And then you can have volunteers too who work, but they're volunteers, they're doing karma yoga. So volunteer means, you know, you work in exchange of like food, room, bedding, you know, place to sleep, like emotional support, family, warmth, company, you know, these kind of things. So you can volunteer, but you're not expecting, you're not really, you know, pushing your limits in order to create that benefit. So that's why, you know, centers, if they don't have good finance backup, then they cannot offer that kind of, you know, financial security for the individual, which is very important in harmony, because we live in a capitalistic world. We're not like la la la. We're not living in the clouds. You know, we actually have to pay for the food we eat. We have to pay for the rent we have to live in. You know, and many times people depend on us. So it's not easy. You know, it's very easy to talk about Dharma and talk about this and that, but when it comes to practical life, Lama Yeshe was very clear about that. You know, so that's why Lama Yeshe used to always push to create businesses, to have independent finance, each center, to have their own kind of method of having income, not just based on donations and sponsors, but also having capitalistic income. Of course, the business should be something that helps people. Obviously, you're not going to invest in fossil fuel or something like that, right? If you invest maybe solar power, or, you know, something good like organic food restaurant, or, you know, vegan restaurant, cafe, or I don't know, something that really benefits people. You know, yoga courses, workshops, certain workshops where people learn arts that are really beneficial in life. You know, like I don't know, permaculture, for example, or you know, Tibetan medicine. You yoga or exercise or even any kind of type of meditation. It doesn't have to be Gelupa meditation. It can be, because there's many people in the world and everybody is different. So nothing. It's not like there's only one truth that works for everybody, one method that works for everybody. If it did, then Buddha Shakyamuni Buddha, he would have only given one teaching, but he didn't. He gave many different types of teachings. Mainly he taught 5 different paths, 5 different techniques. Why? Because people are different, and people relate to different things, and different things work for different people, So that's why we have to also have certain, what do you call it, diversity available to really attract more people. That's another thing I think is very important. Otherwise, we're just Gelupa, then after, in the end, it's limited. We're talking about, universal. Mahayana means universal vehicle, Mahayana. That's what translation of Sanskrit, Mahayana, is universal vehicle. Big vehicle, huge vehicle. So which is basically universal, So it's not about just one thing. Of course, it's very important to keep the tradition. It's very important to have the roots so that you can always go back to that. If you really want to go to the essence, you have it available. And Lama Soba Rinpoche, he's making sure that happens. He's making sure that's there. That's why it's a foundation for the preservation of the Mahayana tradition, of that tradition that came from Shakyamuni Buddha, from the Nalanda tradition, from the interpretation of the Tibetan people who actually brought that to Tibet and kept that. And now it's available in the pure form, the essence, the nuggets, the nectar. It's there. So we can diversify like branches from a tree, but we have the trunk, we have the roots, and so it's a great opportunity because we don't have the danger of being misled or misguided or losing a little bit the actual essence of Tibetan Buddhism Dharma, coming from the Nalanda tradition and from Shakyamuni Buddha. It's already there, so we have that potential and that possibility to really branch out, and that's the beauty. We can branch out and we can do it very well because we have that foundation. We have that, But if we keep thinking, oh, we have to be really, really, really traditional, which is great, but we don't open our minds, then we're not making available the Dharma for so many other people who could actually be attracted and identified with that. So how do we do that? Is by diversifying, by opening up. And then slowly when we create interest, then we can say, okay, you want some more? Here, have the real chocolate. So I think it's important. Finance, very important. And how do we do that? Brainstorming. You get together and try to find ways to really. First of all, I think it's important to have your own place. You have to get your own place. You have to buy property. You're already 20 years paying rent. The money hasn't really come back to the center. If you buy a property and you pay the money towards actually buying the property every month, actually the money is coming back to the center. It's not going away. So you have to think business. It's also important. We're living in a capitalistic world, or at least system, not world. Sorry. The system, society expects you to participate in it. So we have to also, respect the rules in that sense, because otherwise we have these problems. And it's not like just hope for the best and just move on. No, we have to be realistic. So first of all, I think it would be important to, solidify property. Have your own place, so you can really feel, okay, this is a community, it's solid. You have the security, the trust in the property, in the place, the area. And then after that, then you can start to maybe branch out, create some business maybe. Depending, you have brainstorming, you see what you can do, how to do, work on that. And then also maybe be a little bit more easygoing with the with the people who have more responsibilities, with the people who are accountable. Of course, a good leader will take responsibility. A good leader will recognize their mistakes and will learn. But you also have to go easy on the leaders because they do have a limit, and they are human, and they do have feelings. And I think it's important, to work together as a family, And also, when people make decisions, sometimes if everybody has to decide together, it can be really complicated. It can be chaos. Because not everybody is going to agree on the same thing. So it's important sometimes to have certain key people who make the decisions for the rest. But those decisions have to be based on the collective understanding and desire. So it's a thing about trust. If people don't trust the leader, then the leader cannot really function. But it's also the leader's responsibility to create that trust. If a leader doesn't recognize a mistake, then how can you trust them? If they don't want to learn, if they're not open to other people's advice or suggestion, then how can you trust them? So it goes both ways. So anyways, that's why I say maybe buy some lottery tickets. It could help, who knows? 60 million euros wouldn't be too bad, huh?
I think we could find a place then.
Yeah, maybe a small place.
Yeah.
So tell me some of the problems I would like to hear. Is there any issues?
I think the financial problem
Financial
is serious. At this point, we
Yeah.
Martin and I just met recently to try to find a solution to it, and at this point we are facing a deficit every month.
Really?
So that's an important one. I think the other one is that it has. Today it's wonderful to see how many people are actually here and who has been volunteering over so many years. But I think we are also facing a point where we have built up a center that has it has high maintenance. We have many activities. We have a place. We have a resident teacher. We have a finance. We have website. We have Facebook. So it is a high maintenance center, and in periods where there are less volunteers, then it will fall back to those who are involved, and I think we have been experienced that in the past year, that we have continued to maintain this high level of activity and engagement, but with fewer people, and that has been really stressful on some, and some of them has had to leave because it was too much for them. And this is what we are trying now as much as we can to change. As long as we are not able to pay people to spend their full time here, we have to find a way where we can divide it between more people.
Do you have a board?
We don't have a board. We did have a board, but since most of the board members retired, it has been just me and Martin and Maria who is left in the board. So which means that we are effectively not having board meetings at this point. But we have some very engaged volunteers at other levels. For instance, today Cindy and Martin has been here since 8 o'clock in the morning and preparing this room. So it's not that we don't have volunteers, but
Maybe you have to do more mantras.
well, Maria and Jette is very busy doing prayers and mantras once a week, I think, almost.
Only once in a week.
Well, for 3 hours.
Just joking.
No, we do Tara Puja and Medicine Buddha Puja, and then we do wish fulfilling sovereign, because we want also to buy a retreat place.
Retreat place, but you have to buy your own place first.
So you think this is better?
No, I think it's more. You have to first of all secure a location in the city, because the people who are really suffering and who really need the help are people in the city. Once you have that secure, then you can have the alternative option of going to retreat. But right now, retreat center, you really have to help the people in the city first, and they're not ready for retreat.
No, no.
They have mind been distracted constantly. They're like full of distraction and entertainment. For them, it's impossible to retreat. So retreat center is not really viable
Viable.
option. Because it's not really going to create that much benefit. Because we try to think in the way of how to create the most benefit. So the most benefit is by actually being able to attract a larger number of people. How do we do that? By diversifying, like doing maybe like renting out the space for other activities that are not just Gelugpa traditional teachings or meditation courses. And I think that should be okay, as long as the community agrees on what type of activities there should be. Even for example, like what do you call those places, like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous?
Yeah.
Like something also that can even be helpful. Just because people coming here which have those problems, and then they can really they have inspiration, they have support, they have
I think they used to have that at Jamyang.
Jamyang?
Yeah.
The space, maybe it's not so good to have a cafe here, but if you secure a place and you can create that, that could bring some income. At least at the beginning, it can be a little bit difficult to get it running. But once you get it running, it can have something. If you rent out the place, if you can buy a good property, you can rent out the space also to like for other maybe religious organizations to do their kind of meetings. Rent out the space for the meetings, maybe make available food, maybe rent out some rooms, have activities like that. And then more people can come in also. I don't know, there's many possibilities. Just have to be more creative. It's very good, to be open-minded, to just think out of the box. Very important, because, like FPMT as an organization, sometimes it's a little bit limited the way, they try to do the things, because FPMT sometimes acts like, like we don't need finance, we can just live off of like the kindness of the sponsors and the benefactors, but many of the sponsors and benefactors are inspired by Lama Sopa Rinpoche, So if he goes into retreat someday, then, like, who's going to inspire those sponsors to keep donating? We have to think in the long term, not just short term. Business-wise also, because we live in a capitalistic place. If we were like the church, where, like Buddhist centers received money partly from the taxes, like they're trying to do in Italy, they're there already, in Italy. For the past, I think, 15 years they've been working. So now in Italy, people, when they pay the taxes, they have the option to donate the taxes to a Buddhist community. And there's many different Buddhist organizations together, and one of them is FPMT. So they're receiving millions every year now, starting, from the taxes. And this is with the permission of the church. They're working with the government, with the church, as a religious organization that they all together represent Buddhism. So you have Kagyu, Nyingma, Sakya, Gelugpa, you have all kinds of them together. Like Thich Nhat Hanh organization, and even a New Kadampa tradition is inside there, believe it or not. That's how it is, but at least, like the FPMT, within all that collective, is also receiving certain amount of money from tax in Italy. I'm not sure exactly on the details, but that's what I understand is happening. Or at least it's starting this year. So that's really good. And they've been working for that for the past 15 years. Now they're finally getting the result. So this is just another way, to be more practical in a capitalistic world, a capitalistic system. So you have to be practical in order to, be of even more benefit. And that's what Lama Yeshe used to always say, And one of the things he used to say is let do. He used to say that a lot. Let do. Which means just let people do, what they are inspired, how they're inspired, what they feel like. Sometimes within FPMT, because of the pyramid shape, it's hard sometimes to really delegate and give complete freedom. It's hard to just let people do. I mean, they do, but sometimes it's like we have to kind of report to someone else and get permission or not, or this and that. Sometimes it can be difficult to communicate or to get a straight answer or to really understand what Lama Zopa said sometimes, because there's a lot of interpretations and the message is passed on through different receptors and so it's not easy. For example, in the time of Genghis Khan, the Mongolian armies, one of the reasons why they were so effective was because they put in charge certain leaders who, in order to get to those positions, they really had to have the experience and the training. So it wasn't like, because you're from a noble family, here you can have an army of 10,000 men. No, they have to earn that. Slowly. So everybody who was in charge was experienced and had, the potential, they had the ability to really lead how it should be. They had the capacity, mental capacity and experience. So that's how they delegated the Mongolian army. So if they had 100,000 men, they had 10 different armies that worked completely independently from the leader. So they could make their own decisions inside the battle. So a Mongolian army of 100,000 men could defeat an army of 500,000 men easily. Why? Because the other army of 500,000 reported to only one person, one brain. And that one brain had to decide in the middle of a battle what to do. And the time the message took from when something's happening to that man and then to go back again, everything's changed already. So the battlefield is happening. It's in movement. It's constantly changing. So when you make a decision, you have to make the decision right there. And you have to be able to assess the situation. Who better to assess than the person who's there at that moment? So if that person has the freedom and the independence to make those decisions by themselves, then the result is going to be much more effective. And that's one of the, that's why history also is really good to study history, because that's how we learn from our mistakes, and that's how we learn from, the good things from the past. I'm not saying it's good to defeat 500,000 army, but at least the method, shows how delegation is so important. To create leaders that are able to work freely. And I'm not saying we're not going to make mistakes. Of course we're going to make mistakes. Making mistakes is a good thing. Because if we don't make mistakes, it means we're not doing anything. So it's more practical, and that's how the Mongolians, they would defeat these huge armies. There'll be one guy on an elephant and all these messengers coming, and he was like, oh, at the end he had a headache, and then by the time he sent the message, they would go there, that side of the army would be destroyed already. Maybe because the Mongolians had 100,000 men divided in 10 parts. So each leader, they would have 10,000 men under them. And it would be divided 10 times. So that leader, each leader had 1,000 men under them, and each of them 100 men, and each of them 10 men. So one man had responsibility over 10 men. And each of those 10 men had over one person. So that would be 100 men. And then one of those 10 men, 1,000 men. And every 10 men, 10,000. So one person delegated to 10. And each of those delegated to another 10. And that's how it worked. And in the battlefield, they had very effective results. They conquered more than anyone ever in the history of the humanity. More than Alexander the Great, more than the Romans, more than Napoleon, more than the Nazis. And they were on ponies. No, but the reason why it's funny, but the ponies are very resistant,
Yeah.
So. So it's our logic. Oh, why not horses? Horses are much bigger. No, ponies. They would actually a 100,000, army. They would move 100 kilometers a day on the ponies. And each soldier had like 1 or 2 ponies reserved. And sometimes they would move. They would like make a hole on the pony, drink the blood, and then cover it up again, so that they could maintain. And they would have like dried meat under the saddle, and then they would like take it out, eat from that, eat some like dried cheese, and then drink some blood from the pony, and then they would keep going. So they would move really fast. And one of the deadliest techniques, anyways, I'm going.
History lesson now.
It was very interesting. One of the deadliest techniques is how they shot arrows. They would be riding on the horse, and that one moment when the 4 hoofs of the pony were not touching the floor, when they're actually in the air, that's when they would shoot the arrow. So they would wait for that one moment, and then they would shoot. So it was so accurate. And the arrows would go much further, and they would penetrate any type of armor, because the bows were really strong, very hard. So that's one of the main reasons why they were moving. So they had these archers that you could never catch, and they could shoot so far away, and really, really accurate.
So we just need ponies and accurate bows to run the center.
And good delegation. So think about, we can say, okay, maybe the pony is a motivation. Pony is a motivation. We have very hardcore, enduring motivation. The arrow is the sharpness of our mind, right?
Good.
How much we train the mind, and the delegation is maybe the representation of the community, of the finance, of the brainstorming, of the creativeness. So then we can conquer the world, In other terms, spread the Dharma and really help sentient beings. Anyways, maybe in the end Genghis Khan was a good guy.
Do you want to have a few questions?
Yeah, sure. Please.
Does anyone of you have a question that's relevant for, or you think it's relevant for the community and the center, and your work as a volunteer?
I have a personal question.
Oh, good.
I hope would have some relevance. So when you're giving, there's also an expectation of some reward. It could be, and that can be a little bit sticky.
Mm.
And also we're practicing humility, and it's part of the
It's gratification, right?
exactly, yeah. And I'm a performer, so
You're performing what kind? Music or dance?
musician.
What do you play?
Viola,
Violin.
violin, and viola.
Oh, you have it.
I have it here.
Wow.
Play.
No, that'd be really beautiful. Are we allowed to play music in the center?
Yes.
So very personally, I'm experiencing that. Of course, I'm offering, what talents that I have.
Mm.
But then there's that stickiness that, oh, but what about me? So it's part of me, because of course I'm not, realized. So I'm experiencing. And this center was the first place that I was offered service, real service.
Mm.
Of course, as a musician, we offer service, but this was the first time I was volunteering, and then I started to tackle those frontiers. And now it's in relationship, now it's in other spheres, but I'm experiencing that now I play. Oh, there is a response. How do I feed off that? Do I give? But I also expecting some kind of reward at any level.
Yeah.
So
Recognition,
Yeah.
gratification.
exactly, and of course criticism can also come into that, and then I'm destroyed. So it's
Destroyed?
yeah, well, ego destroyed, exposed.
But this is actually very positive, because just the fact that you're talking about it is already more than 50%. It's done. It's like already you built the foundations and part of the walls. So now you just have to put the windows and the roof. And you're done. So it's big, it's already big, Many people will not recognize. It's a little bit like the addicts. When you have an addiction, you don't want to recognize that you have an addiction. But just recognizing it is already more than 50%. In the same way we are addicted to gratifying, to feeding the ego. You know, and then just to recognize that we have an ego is already big step. It's already half of the job is done. You know, because once you recognize, then energetically you already start to create the cause for that to organically start to move towards the direction you want. But if you don't recognize, then you're blocked, you're stuck, you're not moving. You know, so it's good to start moving at least, to know where you want to go. So already that's already big step, very big, important step. So I think already you've done most of the job. And I really appreciate you saying it, you know, because it really shows your dedication, you know, and I'm not trying to, you know, help your ego. I'm just also trying to help other people to be inspired by that. And I really want to thank you also for the help that you're offering. And I think this is also a very good, very important thing. So many times we give because we want to receive. Even maybe consciously we don't do it, but unconsciously we kind of expect something in return. And already that's a wrong point of view, that's a wrong method. Because when we give to receive, then the result is not going to be good. You know, we're going to suffer. Because the motivation is very important, and the motivation is everything. Karma works with the motivation. So if your motivation is to receive, then the result is going to be sketchy. You know? And I'm not saying that we don't work like that, most of us work like that. But it's good to recognize it, and it's good to always be aware of that. Because when you give without expecting anything in return at all, that's where you really can you know, flower. That's a real juicy, delicious chocolate. That's the one. When you give without expecting anything. And many times in life will bring you challenges, you know, where you try really hard to give without expecting anything, and then you won't get anything at all. And those are the challenges that life gives you, you know. But without a challenge, then all the other kind of, you know, the other kind of what do you say? Like the other, you know, desires or the other activities will kind of like become more lazy. You know, when you have a challenge, then you really make it flower. You know, you're more active, you're more there, you're more present. So it's good to have challenges all the time. When you have challenges, you become more active. You are more awake. You're more aware. So it's good to challenge yourself and to say, okay. And the feeling is much better. It's much more gratifying to give without expecting. You know, because in that way, then you really can feel the true Dharma, the true compassion, the true non-cherishing mind. That's where we're trying to go. You know, that's Karma Yoga. Even sometimes, you know, like His Holiness, he calls it, was it selfish compassion, is it? Or was it?
Wise selfishness.
Wise selfishness. No, wise selfishness?
That's one.
Is that what he calls it?
Yeah, I think so.
Wise selfishness. So that's good motivation to try to give compassion, to also like try to help yourself evolve and grow spiritually, you know. So I don't know if that's helpful.
It's very, very helpful.
Yeah.
It's very deep-rooted, that manipulation of helping another so that, you know, our survival is rooted so deeply. So we help another, why? So that they will help us when we're in need. So that's, of course, part of the tripping of that whole.
But that's the thing, if we don't really help ourselves, we don't love ourselves first, then it's very hard to give. It's very hard to help other people or love other people. So we really have to understand that balance, you know, to have our balance, to actually grow spiritually within ourselves and work that, so that collectively we can actually offer that. And even though we don't say or do or think anything, energetically we're already influencing the people already, just by working on ourselves. So that's very important also. You know, because maybe we don't have, we're like more, we think, oh, going to community, working in the community is fine, but if we don't have that balance within ourselves, then the effect is not so beneficial. You know, so it works two ways, you know. Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. It's very difficult, and it's something, you know, like dedication is very hard. It's not about just, oh, today I'm gonna do that, and tomorrow I'm gonna change my mind. I'm gonna be more lazy. I'm gonna be like, oh, you know, whatever. You know, it's really dedication is really hard, but when you dedicate every day and you're there, the gratification is really big. You know, because the result, especially when you're non-cherishing, and when you're not expecting anything, then the result will come in a very surprising way when you least expect it. And when it does, it's going to be very big. You know, it's really going to take you a long way. But don't expect it. You know, because when you expect it, you create the cause for it not to come. You know, it's like when you're looking for a relationship, or when you're looking for, you know, something, the more you look for it sometimes, the less it's going to happen. Because you put too much pressure on it. Too much expectations. And then if something comes, it's never going to reach the expectations that you have. So you're always going to be unsatisfied. In Spanish we call it desilusionado. Disillusion. You know? So don't expect. Expectations are not good. Unless, of course, it's something, you know, kind of more for other people, you know, like you try to be positive. So then you have positive expectations, in a sense like you value more positiveness than negativeness. So then the positiveness becomes more important, you know? And then that's what really becomes solid. So that kind of expectation is good. But not the self-cherishing expectation, because that's only going to hit you really hard, man. Really hard. And then it's going to just bring you down. And of course, sometimes it's good to fall down so that we can rise like the phoenix, even stronger and higher. But that's not always an effective method, you know, because we really have to take care of ourselves. We have to value ourselves. You know, we have to grow. And if we like hit ourselves all the time, then it just becomes too much sometimes. You know, once in a while, okay, you know, we can make a mistake, we can fall, you know, grow again. But try to keep a stability. Try to keep, you know, self-loving, kind of peaceful, harmonious lifestyle. Then you can really give much more. So if you don't have that stability within yourself, then it's very difficult to give. You know? Fall into this kind of chaotic mind stream, which really, in the end, all you have is more, you know, disharmony and conflict. And then you don't really learn from your mistakes, you know. Making mistakes, the whole point of it is to learn and to move on so you can make new mistakes. If you keep repeating the same mistakes all the time, then it's completely useless. Then what's the point, you know? Then you have to wait for the next life. Start over again. Anyways.
So I think we can have lunch now, and then we can have time for more questions.
Oh? Okay. Well, what time is it? 2 o'clock?
2 o'clock, yeah.
Alright. Oh. Angela, I need your technical support.
Welcome to Brazilian.
Is that the second time you hit your head?
Huh?
That's the second time you hit.
Yeah. We find out.
Is it the same side or is it the other side?
No, it's not.
It's the other side. Now you have the balance.